Hi everyone, welcome to the webinar. And so I'll just start off with a little bit of introduction and what we're going to do during the webinar. So my name is Tanmai. I head engineering at a company called Hasura, and we're one of the partners for the HackerEarth Hackathon. And our main intention during this hackathon is to show you guys how you guys can build out a few applications very easily and deploy them in a way such that like your demo is kind of really sexy. You can show off on a public URL. Other people can also access your demo, and within the time that you spend building your application, about slightly less than a day, slightly less than 24 hours, and about 20 hours. At the end of it, you should have a kind of cool app ready to demo, right? So the two applications that we'll be talking about today are going to be we're going to look at a small chatbot, and we're just going to do absolute basics, right? And so this is kind of a webinar meant for people who are just starting out with building a chatbot or a fintech app. And the idea is to show you guys how a simple chatbot app is built. So we'll be building a chatbot. We'll be using a chatbot on Facebook Messenger, right? And then the second application will be a fintech app, and we'll kind of take you over the thought process of how we thought of the chatbot, and then what kind of code we wrote, and how we thought of a fintech app, and then how we wrote the code, and how we deployed the code finally to demo it to other people, right? So I'll give you a quick introduction to Hasura itself. So Hasura is a platform, kind of a set of tools that you guys can install to kind of install a tool. It's a platform that you can kind of install on your servers, and the idea is that it makes certain portions of building your backend faster and deploying your backend faster, right? So for example, when you install the Hasura platform on a DigitalOcean machine, or on your Google Cloud machine, or on your AWS machine, right? What happens is that we install the platform itself contains a Postgres database, it contains a Redis cache, it contains certain APIs like a data API and authentication API, and these portions are already there, right? So you don't have to worry about deploying it, you don't have to worry about setting it up, you can just get started writing code quickly, right? And over this hackathon and over this kind of webinar, we'll be looking at a few features of Hasura that are useful when you're building something on a timeline, and when you're building something on a hackathon. So so the first and for those folks who joined in new, the first session, a 15-20 minute session, will be by my colleague Json, and he's going to talk a little bit about how he built how he thought of a chatbot, a really simple chatbot, how he thought of it, how he set it up, and how he deployed the code. And next we'll look at a fintech app, which will be demoed by Karthikeya, another colleague of mine. And what we'll do is we'll keep the session really basic, and you guys can keep posting your questions. You guys should all have a kind of a chat window. You guys can keep posting your questions, and towards the end of the webinar, we'll take all those questions, and we'll answer as many questions as we can. Now, another thing that I would like you guys to keep in mind is that after this webinar, we'll be sending you an email, and that email will contain a few useful links for you guys. And I think some of the most important links will be a Slack link, where you guys can kind of join the Slack link, and you guys can ask us questions about the app that you're building, and we'll help you out with the app that you're going to be building. And I think the most kind of important thing will be that if you guys give us feedback after this webinar about what stuff you want to go into more detail, then we'll help you out with that, and we'll do a more deep dive into something specific. For example, if you look at the chat app, the basic chat app today that we're going to show you is just going to be an integration with Facebook Messenger, and just kind of getting the basic thing working, right? But then depending on your interest and your feedback, if you guys want to get into more detail, you guys want to see an integration with something like Wit.ai or with Watson, and how to train your models as well, we can do another demo, or we'll send you links to a few video tutorials that we'll make for you guys, and you guys can check that out as well, right? So with that said, give us a few seconds to bring Json online, and Json will start his demo of the chatbot.
Hey guys. All right, so so I am, as Tanmai introduced, I am Json, and I work at Hasura. So and we are going to build a very, very simple chatbot today, and the whole intent of the chatbot is to build it on FB Messenger, because they have a very good framework and very good support for it. And secondly, what the chatbot would do is that once you get started, I mean, you can simply give it a name of a movie and it will query that name against this site called the Movie DB, which is an which provides an open API for movies and its details and whatnot. So we'll query this website and their open API and get a few details about this movie, show the user the cards regarding the movie information, and then you can click on that card and then basically it'll take you to a more detailed page. This is basically what we're going to do today, and let's get started. So to start building, there are three major steps to this. The first one would be set up an environment. Basically, this is setting up your server where you would host your code and what your Facebook Messenger will talk with. Secondly, you would build a Facebook application, which is required to set up your messenger bot. And finally, you set up your messenger, right? So firstly, you will have to go to developers.facebook.com/ and you will have to create a new app here. I've already created an app, but anyways, I'll just show you guys. So let's call it something. Let's call it testbot. And let's create this app. You have to enter this really cryptic text. No idea what it says. Okay. Yeah, so once you've created your app, you have to go select Messenger here, setup. Right, so now you have this setup. The next thing you have to do is you need to have a server wherein your messenger can basically verify and talk to, right? So for that, we are going to use Hasura to host our server. So to do this, go to dashboard.hasura.io and click on one second. Yeah, and click on create project, and you'll have to create a project of your own. I already have a project created. I am going to skip this step because this takes about 5 to a few minutes, and I don't think we want that right now. So once you've created your project, you will have to download another thing called Hasura CTL, which is the command line tool to use Hasura projects. And you can just go to search Hasura CTL on Google and you will get this. So for those of you who have a Windows machine, Linux machine, or Mac machine, just follow the instructions and download Hasura CTL. Now, once you do that, you will have Hasura CTL installed on your terminal. You will have to set, so if you do a Hasura CTL help, you'll get to see all the commands that are possible. Now, once you create your project, you will get a name associated with that project. Let me just show you the console as well. So for those of you who create a project right now, you will have a much better looking console and not a console that looks like it's from 1998 or something. But you'll have a very good looking console. But I'm using a very old version of the console of the Hasura console, which is why it looks like this. But anyways, the thing is that the project name is important here. So you will have to get the project name and also follow these instructions to start Hasura CTL and whatnot on your system, right? Once you're done with that, you'll have to click on Hasura CTL and quick start. So we have created a lot of easy to use examples. One second. Yeah, it is list, sorry. Yeah, so if you do Hasura CTL quick start list, you get a list of all the, one second. So these are all the frameworks that we support right now. So I'm going to make a Node.js server. I'm going to use a Node.js server. So I'm going to do a, one second, let me just go to that. Okay, all right. Now I'm going to do a Hasura CTL quick start. And Node.js Express. And we have to name this this app as something as well. So let's call it bot test. Right. So now I have a directory called bot test, which has a lot of files in it. which are required to deploy it into Hasura. I'm not going to get into that right now, but what is important is the source and the server.js that is created for you, right? So let's head on to that. All right, now, and 1 second, I am just going to use Atom to do this. Okay, so now we have a server.js file which listens on 8080 and just prints a hello world when hit, right? So let's deploy this. So get over to your console again. You'll have to click on add a new service. And let's call this something. Enable git push. This would be a little different for you guys, but for the time being, I'm just going to use this UI to show this to you guys. So as you can see, the port is 8080. The name of the let's call it test bot. All right. So now we're going to wait until this thing gets created. So as you can see, to deploy our app into this container that we've created, we have to head over to the directory where we had project listed, initialize it as a Git repository, and then once that is done, let's make our first commit as well. Right. All right. So now, once we have made our initial commit, we can now head over to this, add this service as our remote URL. Let's paste that. Now, if you do a 1 second, no, 1 second. All right. So I think this was already there. Let me just remove this. Okay. So now I'm going to do a yeah. So now we've added this link as a remote repository, and now let's just do a git push Hasura master. Okay, so now we have deployed our app. Just have a look at it. So now, as you can see, if you go to this URL, the /endpoint returns a hello world. I can also change this to, let's change this to something like, I am a bot yet to be created. All right. Save this and repeat the step that you've done. So commit and do a git push Hasura master again. And that gets done again. Now, as you can see, yeah, this is deploy. All right, so this is us deploying the server, right? So we've set up our environment, we've deployed a very simple Node.js server, and we have successfully completed step 1 and partially step 2, right? Now let's head back to our test bot that we created here. Go to webhooks. So now the first thing that you have to do is that the Facebook Messenger, the Facebook API will first verify your server. For that, you need to write a GET request to the to a webhooks endpoint, and I am just going to head over to the code that I've already written for these things. Just give me a second. All right. So you have to write a get request of this sort, right? Yeah. So what this does is this is a get request to the webhook endpoint, which takes in a which gets a verify token key from the request, and it verifies if the Facebook password that we have given to it is the same, right? How do we do this? We get over to the set of webhooks. Yeah. Now here, let's set a temporary password. So let's call it my bot password, and our webhook URL will be this / webhook, right? And this is the password. So now let me just add that as my password. Yeah. Let's save this. And push the changes again. Also ensure to check all these subscription fields. All of these are permissions and subscriptions that you're giving for the chatbot, which we will get to in a bit. So when you click on verify and save, Facebook is basically hitting that endpoint / webhook endpoint and checking whether that endpoint exists. And so what is happening over here is that it's Facebook endpoint basically sends the password that we just set, and we are verifying whether the password is the same as the one that we gave, and then we are responding with the challenge, one of the queries that it sends, right? In case that wasn't, in case the password was different, we would be sending an error response. Now that is done, next thing we need to do is so this bot will be hosted on a random page, right? So let's just create any page that you want. So in this case, I'm just going to create a entertainment page because it's going to be a movie recommender, right? So let's call it movie info provider or whatever. One second. Click on film as the category, give a name for your page, and click on get started. Okay. It's saying that the name is okay. Cool. Now we wait until Facebook creates this page for us. All right, cool. So this page has been created. Now, the next thing we need to do is let's add a button to this page so that people who come to this page can start chatting. So yeah, so click on get in touch, send message, and add that button. Now you can test this out by clicking test button and sending whatever you want, right? All right, so now the messages that come to this bot is received in the post is received in a post webhook endpoint, which would be this one. Now I will show you what this does in a moment. So let's get this endpoint working. All right, so what this endpoint does is, so before we get to anything, let's just print what the endpoint is sending, right? So what it does is first it just prints out the endpoint, I mean, whatever request that is sent to this endpoint. Second thing it does is it checks whether this request is sent from a page. There are different types of requests that can come, and page, since we've set up a page for a messenger bot, that is what we're checking for right now. And then, all right, before we get to any of these things, I think it makes sense that you guys see how the response looks like. So what you can do is, let's just deploy this. All right. So now we've deployed that. So now if we go to our testbot page, which is here, and we can click on our logs, right? And now let's see something that comes up to this. Let's say hello. Yeah, sorry, that was the wrong app. One second. Second, guys. Just check this out. All right. Yeah. I think unless we send a response to this, it doesn't get printed. So I think we might have to do that as well.
Hi guys, so while Jason is, you can keep looking at Jason's screen to see what code he's writing. But in the meantime, let me just do a quick summary and take on the questions that we've had so far. There are lots of questions, and the session, I guess, is a little too fast sometimes for people. So let me just quickly summarize what we've done so far. So the idea is to set up a Facebook Messenger bot, right? And what that means is that on a Facebook page, there'll be a chat window that can open up, and on that chat window, you can type in information. And if you type in information, you should get a result, right? So the bot should respond to you inside the chat window and you should get something. So the idea is that Jason's creating a Facebook page. He's created a Facebook app. That's the portion that he showed you in the beginning. Once he does that, he's going to have a little chat box, which is also something that he showed you. What you want to now do as a developer is that if anybody types a message into the chat window, right, you want your code to capture that message. And depending on that message, you then want to do a particular action. So for example, in our case, what we eventually want to build is that if somebody asks us for a movie, our bot should take in the name of the movie, should process that, figure out what information the bot can provide that is related to the movie, and then respond with the particular movie information, right? So that's the overall setup of what Jason is building here. Now, if you look at what he set up, he first set up a Facebook app, he then set up a Facebook page, and then he got a chat window on that Facebook page. The second thing that he set up is a place where he can host his code, right? So his code is Node.js, is a simple Node.js API, right? So it's written in Node.js, in the Node.js language, and it's written in a framework called Express, right? So he has this API that he's writing. The aim is that whenever somebody types in a message on the chat window, the message will be sent to our API, and our API will respond with a particular message, right? So what Jason has written something called a webhook. So you can see in his code that there should be something called a webhook, right? So that is the URL. That is the URL that will be called by Facebook. So whenever a user goes onto the chatbot and types a particular message, right? Whenever the user goes onto the Facebook page, types a particular message, Facebook will take that message and Facebook will send that message to our API. Now, our API has to take that message, process it, and respond with it, right? So that's where our API comes in. The other portion that Jason showed you you was that he logged into dashboard.hasura.io and created a project, which is basically just creating a server, right? So what this does is this goes on the back, it goes to Microsoft Azure, it creates a server of 4 GB RAM server for you and sends up the server for you, right? And this server, you can deploy whatever code you want on the server. This server also has a URL. So for example, in Jason's project is called Hello70. So the domain that he has is hello70.hasura.io. When you guys go and create projects, you guys will get your own domain. So for example, you get project 42. These are random names and random numbers, right? So you will get your own project URLs, right? And once you have these project URLs, this is your server, and this is where you'll be deploying your server. The next thing that Jason showed you was that he used a command line tool called Hasura CTL to create the basic Node.js code, right? Because sometimes just creating the basic Node.js code, writing server.js, setting up var express equal to require express, and just getting the basic hello world app is a little painful. So if that is not painful to you and you are a Node.js expert, it's not an issue. But otherwise, when you go into Hasura CTL and create a particular and you create a scaffold, the technical word is scaffold, you get something called a server.js, right? And this server.js contains a simple URL called hello world, right? So on slash, it gives you hello world. So the next portion that Jason showed you was that he had a simple Node.js app, right? And then he deployed this onto his project. So he's deployed it on bottest.hello70.hasura.io, right? He deployed it there, and all that his code does is that when you go to bottest.hello70.hasura.io, it shows you hello world, right? And then he made a change, and then he said that hello world is changing to hello, I'm a bot, right? So that's him getting his basic API working, right? So he's got his Facebook app set up, he's got his Facebook page set up, he's got his basic API set up, right? Now what he wants to do is that inside his API, he's going to be able to write code, and in that code, he's going to write code which will capture the message that Facebook is sending to his API, and then he'll respond to that message with information about the movie, right? Okay, so I'm just going to quickly answer some of the questions that you guys have had, right? So some of you guys are wondering if there's any prerequisites or whether this is ready for beginners. This is sort of ready for beginners, but you guys and please don't worry about the fact that this webinar might be going at a pace that is too fast for some of you guys, because we'll have a recording that will be available to you, right? And depending on the feedback that we get after this, we can go into a slower or a more detailed webinar, or we can do something more complicated, depending on what you guys want. So do not worry about the speed of the webinar, or do not worry about not following everything. Just try to grasp the high level concepts, right? Because we're on a little bit of a limited time, right? Let me just look at some of the other questions. Some of you guys have questions on the tools that Jason is using, right? So he's using Hasura as a tool to set up his server. Again, you can use any server that you want, right? The code will stay the same. The Node.js code will stay the same. We're just using Hasura to make a deployment process faster, right? Because if you have to deploy this on your own domain name, you have to buy a domain, you have to buy SSL certificates. It's a fair amount of pain, right? So Hasura is just solving that part of the pain for you, right? So don't worry about that. You guys can use whatever you want. You guys can also not deploy it on a server if you want, but obviously deploying it on a server is cooler, right? I think Sushant had a question of how this is different from Heroku. This is not very different from Heroku, the part that Jason is doing. There'll be a part that Karthikeya does, which will show you, how this is different from other platforms or other PaaS services like Heroku or App Engine. So we'll get into that later. But this session is not too much about Hasura. This session is about how to build a chatbot, right? So we won't get into too much Hasura detail. Let's look at another question. Some of you have a question of what the webhook is, right? So a webhook is the URL that your API will have, and Facebook is configured to talk to the webhook. That's what a webhook is. A webhook is like saying that it's telling Facebook that Facebook, if you get a message, right? If somebody is typing a message on facebook.com, Facebook needs to know where to send it to, right? So these things are called hooks. It's actually just an API URL. It's basically bottest.hello70.hasura.io/webhook, right? So that's just the that is just the name of that's just the URL name, right? So the technical name for these things that are called by other programs, they're called hooks, or they're called callbacks, or webhook is just another word for them, right? Some of you have another question on setting up Hasura and setting up Hasura CTL. Hasura CTL, yes, we'll do a quick 5-10 minute video and then share a video with you guys of how to set up Hasura and how to set up Hasura CTL, right? So I think that answers most of the questions that you guys have. Again, just to summarize very quickly, Facebook app, user is typing in a message, Facebook is sending it to app.hello70.hasura.io/webhook, right? That is a URL where we have written code, right? So that comes into our code. Inside our code, as soon as Facebook sends us some message, we are figuring out in our code, what we're going to do next. So that's how this whole system kind of works together, right? The two people involved in the system are our code, which is sitting on bottest.hello70, and Facebook, which is sitting on Facebook, right? So with that, I'll mute myself and I'll let Jason continue, right?
Hey guys. Okay. Okay. So while I was very busy explaining all these things to you guys, I completely did not. I mean, did not realize that I was going too fast. So I will try to slow down, and hopefully this will be better. All right. So the problem that I was facing earlier was that the console was not printing anything. This is because so one of the frameworks that we're using is Express, which is a very easy framework to host web apps, right? To write a server-side code. So there are a few other things that you need, which is a body parser to parse the requests that are coming in, and also we're also going to use another library called Request to basically make requests on the server, right? So so now to include that in this app, let's do a npm install. So head to source. Basically, 1 second, I'll show you. So once you create your quick start example using Hasura CTL, this is the file structure that you have. So you'll have to head on to app source, all right, and then do a npm install, and then the library names, which would be, in this case, body parser and request, right? So let's do that. So this is basically installing and also, yeah, append a -- save to this. So it's basically installing, including these two libraries into our app. So let's just do that. Okay. All right. Okay. So now that the libraries are included, let's head on to this. So I'm just going to copy paste a little bit of code, guys, because we are running a little short on time. And do not worry about this, because at the end of this webinar, we'll be sending you guys an email with links to all of this, with proper tutorials to do all of these things. Right now, as Tanmai was saying, just get a high level understanding of how things are working, so that when you later on go through this tutorial, it'll be easier for you, right? So let's do that. So this is me including the two libraries, body parser and request, into our project. Let's try and run this code, right? So what I'm going to do right now is push this into our server. So first I commit this. Let's give it whatever commit name you want, and git push Hasura master. So as I said again, guys, do not worry about the pace, or do not worry if you do not understand everything or intricate details on what is going on in this code. This will be properly indented and properly commented for you, and the tutorial will be quite exhaustive on how all of these things work. As I said, for now, just understand how things are working. All right, so I've pushed that code. Now let's head over to our page, and just send a hi again. Let's see if it comes to this time. Yeah, another thing that I forgot, which is very annoying, is that you also need to set up your app to use the body parser, which is the library that I included, right? Which would be, so you have to use the body parser to include encoded URLs, and also to include parse JSON. Let's push this again. We'll just give it whatever ID. All right. Hopefully this time I'm not forgotten anything, so it will work properly. Okay, that's. Oh yeah, so as you can see, somebody has sent a message to this to the movie info provider. So after you create your bot, you also have to publish it to Facebook, and that is another process in itself. So right now, only message that I send will be received, and none of yours messages will be received. Hmm? 1 second. Let me just test this. I think I've forgotten something again. Right. 1 second, guys. Give me a second to. One second, guys. Just give me 5 seconds to have a look at this.
All right, guys, while that happens, I'm going to take the next set of questions. So some of you have questions around whether you can use Android Studio, etc. for this. So just to clarify this, this is Jason's using Node.js and he's using Express as a framework. So that means that he's going to be using, he uses an Atom editor. So you guys can also use, you guys can kind of use whatever editor you want. You obviously, this is, you guys can't use stuff like Android Studio, etc. Some of you have asked, because that's for building an Android app. Facebook Messenger right now does not, right now allows you to write code in JavaScript that gets integrated automatically with the Facebook app, right? So for building chatbots that integrate with Facebook Messenger, you don't really, you can't build an Android app. You don't even actually build a web app, right? The only thing that you're building is an API. So you're only building APIs to kind of answer, respond to particular messages, right? Is copying code somewhere else good? I'm not sure. Nitin has a question. I'm not sure what he means by the question though about copying code, so I'm not going to answer that. Yeah, you guys can use kind of whatever editor you guys want. Some of you have questions around what editors you can use. You guys can use whatever you want. If you are not getting audio or screen display, just wait for some time, because it's probably an issue with the internet. So just give us a few seconds, and we'll be back in a few seconds, I think. Right? Yeah, I think even I am facing an issue with looking at Jason's screen. So just give us a few seconds and we'll be online. Right? I think some of you have had questions around, can there be a case of denial of service attack on the chatbot? It's hard to have a denial of service attack on the chatbot, because actually the requests are not being made directly to the chatbot, right? The requests are being made to Facebook. Facebook is sending that information to our chatbot via the API, via /webhook. So It's hard to kind of do a direct denial of service attack on our chatbot. Of course, it's possible, but Facebook will take care of rate limiting, right? So in case there are too many people that are using the chatbot, Facebook will automatically rate limit or slow it down or say that this chatbot is not available for use right now. So Facebook will kind of take care of that. You guys don't have to worry about that. I think Subarna has a question around whether we can use NLU and Botmaster. No, we don't. We haven't used it yet. But if you are really keen on looking at a tutorial for doing that, we can help you. We can help you out. It's not a problem. Yes, for those of you who are joining in a little late, you will be getting a recording of this webinar. So don't worry. And you'll be getting a recording of this webinar, and you'll be getting a recording of the edited tutorials. That will work fine. Can you guys do this? There's another question around doing this with Google Assistant platform. I haven't used Google Assistant platform, but if it supports APIs like Facebook Messenger, it should be possible. Siddesh has a question about a database, using a database for this API. So you don't need to use a database for this chatbot. That's because at least in Jason's case, what he's doing is that he makes an API query directly to an IMDb-like site. I'm sure some of you guys have heard of IMDb. So he's making a query to an IMDb-like site to get the information about about the particular movies for his chatbot. So he doesn't need a database. But if you guys have a database, then you guys can use a database. You can use a database like Postgres or MySQL or whatever. On Hasura, we provide Postgres, so you guys can use a database like Postgres to kind of do that, right? I think those are all the questions for now. I'm going to switch it back to Jason.
Hey guys, hello again. So this is embarrassing, but so what happened was that once I created the movie info page, you obviously had to set it up, which I conveniently ignored, because of which our Facebook, basically the messenger did not really know who to hit, right? So once you have created your page, ignore all these messages, head back to your developer console, click on select a page. If this page is open, then the new page that is created will not come, so just refresh the page and it will come up. Click on the page that you wanted to create and give it the permission. All right, so now you'll have a page access token, this is a very important thing. So let's head back into our app and 1 second. Yeah, okay. So now over here, let's create another thing called Facebook page token. And let's just paste it here. Ideally, you're supposed to use environmental variables to do this, but I'm just going to ignore that for the time being. All right. Okay. So now that that is done, another thing that you need to do is to enable this, enable your chat message to send this token. So I'm just going to do that. So head over to your terminal, and paste the token that you just copied. So what this is basically doing is that you're telling Facebook that this app is subscribed, and this is the access token for the page. This is the access token for the page which will have your bot, and you're asking Facebook to enable it. Right. So when you do this, when you make this API, when you hit this API, you will get a response. Let's wait for the response. Yeah. So you get a response saying success to, which means that the messenger has been activated for your page. All right. Once that is done, now let's All right, so now let's go to our app. And is there anything else that we've missed? Okay, body pass is there. Oh, all right. Another thing that we missed is the. All right. Let's just get that also. All right, now let's just push this to our server again. All right, and now let's see if it works. Yeah, all right. So as you can see, we've received book as our finally, right? Anyways, so this is the console printing the log of what it has received. The whole point of this was to show you guys what you received from Facebook, right? All right, so I'm just gonna show this in a prettier format so that you guys can see. 1 second. Yeah, 1 second. I think there was some problem with the copy. 1 second, guys. Let me just copy this. I have a little bit of trouble copying this. So, I'm just going to complete it myself now. All right. Okay. All right, cool. So as you can see, the object is of type page, and there's another key called entry, which is an array. This is what is important to us. So we're going to parse this basically and figure out what is being sent to us. So in this case, the message that came to us is hi, right? And this is the ID of the sender who has sent it, which is my ID, and this is the ID of the page or of the app that we just created, which is Hasura movie info provider, right? All right. So all right. So now that we have done with this, next thing we need to know. Next thing we need to do is um, use another library which can query. So how this app is going to work is that it's going to receive a movie name. So let's say in this case I would say Dunkirk, and that would get we would get that in our webhook response as it says Dunkirk, and we're going to use this string and basically just query for this movie and figure out what comes from this movie, right? So for this, I'm going to use, as I said in the beginning, I'm going to use the movie db.org. They have a set of open APIs, and so you just have to go create an account with them, and basically once you've created an account with them, just go to settings. So you need an authenticated account to make APIs to this website. An unknown user is not allowed to make APIs to this. So just go create an account over here and go to APIs, and basically you will get an API key, right? Which is important. Now we can use a library called MovieDB. 1 second, MovieDB. So we can use a library called MovieDB to fetch information about movies, right? So let's install that first. So let's go here. Let's install that into a server code. Next thing is let's include this, and let's name it something else, MDB or something, and let's paste that API key, right? Which would be this one. All right. Okay, so once you've done this, so now we have the library to fetch data. Next, we need to figure out how we can query for movies, right? So which is this. So if you check the npm module over here, their docs has a very good a function called search movie, which will basically take a query and the movie name, and it will respond with the movie details. So I am going to copy some code from the other app that I've written so that we can speeden up the process. I've already wasted a lot of time in figuring out what is going wrong. All right, so I'll explain what this does. So this is basically taking the request, taking the body from the request, and checking if the object is a page. If it is, then basically it is parsing through your entries, which is an array. And for each entry, it's checking if there's a messaging key involved with it. If there is a messaging key, then you are basically checking what type of a message it is, right? So in this case, we have received a message. Facebook bots can also send other things like payloads, which will be actions that the user does and things like that. So for this simple Facebook bot, we're just going to handle messages, which would be this, right? All right. And let's write a function handle message from user, which takes an event, which also I'm just going to copy from the other app that I've written. All right. And yeah, so this is so now what this does is this checks whether this event has a key called echo. So each time you send a message to a Facebook bot, it also responds with the same message that you've sent. So in case this message, in case the message received is a message that we have sent, or basically the bot has replied to the user, we do not want to do anything with it. So that is what this does. Next, we're fetching the message that the user has sent, and also getting the sender ID and printing it out into the log. Now, another thing that you can get is a message. So a bot can accept either a text message or also attachments. In this case, we're only going to handle text messages. So which is why this is what this check does, which is message.text. It checks whether it's a text or if it's an attachment. And if it's an attachment, we simply respond by saying that you don't handle attachments. All right. So now the receive message, we basically take the receive message key, and let's ignore this for the time being. 1 second. All right, so let's say that the movie name will be the text that we receive, and now there's let's write another function called find movie, which would basically find the movie for us. All right, so I'm just going to copy all of this because we'll have to use it anyways. All right, so now what find movie does is it takes the user ID of the user that has sent the message to us. I will just copy this to a better place so that you guys can see this better. All right. So you're sending it a sender ID and also the movie name that you've received. Send typing indicator is another function that I've written, which will basically show a typing indicator, the bubble that you get when somebody is typing a message. It will basically send a typing indicator to the chat body, to the chat window, so that the user knows that our bot is doing some process in the background, or basically searching for movie details or whatnot, right? Now, to send a message via the bot to the user, we need to send a post request with a URL and the access token, which is the Facebook page token that we just got, this one that we created. When we created the page, we got a page token. The method should be a post, and with the body which says recipient, which would be the sender ID, the ID to which the message to be sent to. And in this case, since we want to send a typing indicator, we have to send either of the two keys, which is typing underscore on or typing underscore off. So based on what this function receives, if it's a true or a false, based on that, it sends typing underscore on or typing underscore off, right? And this is just a basic thing to handle the errors. All right. So the find movie function first sends a typing indicator saying that we are searching for something, prints out the movie name in the logs, and then uses the MBD library, which is the mobile DB library. It uses the MBD library to search for the movie, which sends the movie name as a query. Once we get a response from this library, we basically set the typing indicator to false, so which is to hide the typing indicator. We check if the response was an error. In case it was an error, we send a message saying that something went wrong, and whatever. If you want to parse it better, you can parse it better. But for now, I'm just saying that the bot will just say that something went wrong, and that's all I can say for now. And of course, you have to send the user ID, the ID to which this message should be sent. If it's not an error, then what we check for is the results key. So for this, you will need to see what. So I will just show you the type of response that comes from the movie DB. Okay, actually, we're running out of time, so I would like to just skim through this bit. So basically, the movie DB API responds with a key called results, which will have an array of information about the movie that we've searched for. So there are remakes of the movie. So basically, just search. If you search for Spider-Man, you'll find 10 different movies, right? So it'll send you all the different movies. Now, for the time being, what I'm doing over here is that I'm only displaying 5 results and not more than that. And what this does is that it basically gets the result key, it parses into a certain format that Facebook understands, which is this, right? So basically, we set a title for the movie, a subtitle for the movie, an image URL for the movie, which also requires a movie DB placeholder URL, which would be this. So the movie DB API responds with something like placeholder, some ID, and that's what it'll be, right? JPG. This is what it responds with. So to access this URL, you need a base URL, which is this one. So you just have to append the placeholder text that you get into this base URL, which is what is happening here. And in case there is no placeholder URL, we're just simply showing a random, not even random image, we're just showing like a gray image, which is what this URL is for. Next, we're setting a button for the response that the chat will show, that the chatbot will show, which is of type web URL, which means that if that button is clicked, the Facebook Messenger bot will know that it has to open a page. The URL of the page would be this. The ID, the base URL of the page would be this, with the ID of the movie appended to it with a hyphen and the name of the movie in lowercase, right? And the title of the button that we're going to show is going to be called More Details. All right, that is actually a lot of information. I am just going to run this app and explain this a little better. Another thing that you need to know is how you send a message to the Facebook bot is like so. You have to, again, use the Facebook message URL, which is, one second, which is this. So this is the Facebook message URL. So this is the URL to which the messages would be sent. And this is the URL that resolves the message that you send and sends it to the chatbot and sends it through the chatbot to the user. So this is the URL, the access token, that is the page token that you've created, the recipient ID, and the message that you want to send, right? Which is the content that you send. And of course, handling the errors. All right. Let's see. There was a lot of copy pasting and a lot of things. For the time being, I'm just going to run this and let's see if this works. All right. So first we have to, again, guys, do not worry if some things have skimmed over your head or if I've gone through things really fast. This will be explained much better in a tutorial video and the link that we send later. It's just so that you guys can understand how you can deploy a Facebook Messenger bot using Hasura. And the coding part of it is quite secondary because you will understand that quite easily and you'll pick it up quite easily. All right, so now let's head back to our app and let's see if it works. I don't know if it does, but let's see. All right, so it did work, but that was a lot of magic, right? So now, so before that, I will just show I'll just explain what once. Let me just show this to you guys a little better. One second, guys. Internet appears to be really slow, so give me a second. Can I show you this? There's a lot of people. Ashwini went crazy. Ashwani Jha. But yeah, all right. So yeah, I hope you guys can see this a little better now. But anyways, let me just explain how what each of these things are, right? So what's happening is that when I send this, when I send a movie name, one second, guys. Let's send, yeah, the internet is just slow. So I send a new, the three buttons that came up, that is the loading indicator, or that is the indicator that I was talking about over here, which is the set typing indicator. So each time, so I'll just go through what I have done once again. And before that, let me explain one more thing. It is, one second. Yeah, I think you can see this better. This is a very bad UI. All right. So these things that you see are the action buttons that we're sending. So what I'm doing is, so what's happening is that once the Facebook my server receives the name of the movie, it hits the movie DB org database and finds information about the movie Dunkirk, and the movie database basically responds with multiple movie information, and I am basically showing all of that in a list, right? And this button that I've created is the more details button, clicking on which you'll be redirected to that page I was talking about with more details about this movie, which is basically a link in the moviedb.org website. All right. So now that you have a very basic understanding of what's going on in this app, let me explain what each of these methods do. So what happens is that first the webhook URL receives a request from the messenger bot. We check whether if it's a page request. If it is a page request, we basically parse the page request and search for the key entry, and the entry basically has an array of responses. We iterate through all of those entries and then check whether it has a key, whether each entry has a key called messaging. In case it does have a key called messaging, we basically iterate, which is also an array. We iterate through all of the data inside the messaging key. And then we basically send that message or the event that we have received into the handle message from user function. The handle message from user function then checks whether this message is something that is sent from the chatbot itself. And I'll explain how that happens. So as you can see, all the requests that I've received from the chatbot. The chatbot has received and the request that the chatbot has sent, right? So as you can see, there's message, and there are these key called is echo true, which means that this was a message sent by the chatbot to the user. Now, in case we're receiving a message which is sent by the chatbot to the user, we do not really need to do anything and we can ignore it. So what this is doing is it's checking whether this message was sent by the chatbot. If it wasn't, then we have to handle it. How are we handling it? We are first getting the message, then we are getting the sender ID, which is the ID with the ID of the user with which we are having a chat. And we are basically logging all of this in the console, which also I think ideally we should be able to see here. Then we're checking whether this message is a text message or if it's an attachment, because you can also send an attachment, right? Let's just have a look at that. So if I do this and if I just send a random attachment to this, okay, that's going to take a while, unfortunately. Guys, even if you search for all of these, it's not going to come because the app is not published, the Facebook app is not published, and unless it's published, only the developer of the app can chat with the messenger bot. So only once I publish it can you guys use it. So Akash, it will not work unless I published it. So there's no point trying it. Okay, all right. So if I send an attachment, the bot responds by saying that, sorry, currently I can only understand text messages, right? That's because of this method, wherein I'm checking whether the message was an attachment or a text. All right. In case it was a text, I'm taking the text message and I'm assuming that is the movie name, and then I'm finding details about this movie, which is done by this method, which receives the sender ID, that is the ID of the user that sent the message, and the movie name. Again, since we're making a request and now we're fetching data from the movie DB org, we are going to set a typing indicator, which will show that bubble saying that we are doing something, the bot is doing something. Print the message, the movie name to the console logs. All right, and then search for the movie details. Now, one key thing that you guys need to understand is that to send a message, there's a certain format that you need to follow, and which is basically handled by two methods. One is the send message function, and the other one is the send generic message function. If you're just sending a normal text message to the user, the JSON, the post request that you send should have a key called message, and inside that it should have a key called text, which should have the content of the message that you want to send to the user. So when you're sending messages like I cannot handle, I have nothing to say, or things like, currently I only understand text messages, in this case I'm using the send message method. Right now, when we do parse the response by the movie database org, and once we have details about the movie, to show this this colorful UI with these cards and with the buttons, you have to send a different type of response, which is of type attachment, and you should give it a type called template, and then you send it a payload with the template type called generic, and then you send an array of elements. The array of elements is basically each of the cards. Each of these cards is an element. So what I've done is I've basically written. So what this does is, as I said, right, I only wanted to show like 5 cards or 5 elements, and for that reason, I'm parsing through the response that comes from the database, from the mobile DB org data. I'm parsing through that, and I'm making sure that I'm only sending 5. Now I've created another function called get movie element, which is just a helper function so that I don't have to repeat code. So what that does is, I don't think you need this. So what this method does is that it basically, so this is the format for each element, right? Each element is each card. So you basically set a title. The title in this case is the data.original title. So this is the key that is sent by the API that we use to get the movie details. The overview is this the summary of the movie, and then we're giving it an image URL, which is the image that is being shown here, and then the button that you want to set for it. In this case, the button that we've set is a more details button, which is of type web URL. So which means that when this button is clicked, the Facebook Messenger will basically open a new page with this link, right? And this link is basically a detailed link to that movie that has come up. This is basically how the messenger bot works, and I think this would be it. Another thing that you can see is if I send some gibberish, then the messenger bot goes like, I have nothing to say. Madhu, this is not working because, as I said, unless this app is published, unless this bot is published. So for this, you basically have to submit this app to the, you have to publish this app to the Facebook, and then it'll undergo a review process. And then only after the app is, they'll basically undergo, this will basically undergo a review process, and then they will accept the app, and then only then can you guys send message, and and only then will it work. But until then, only the developer of the app can do this. So this is why all of these are not really receiving any feedback. Also, my name is Jason Jayaprakash. Okay, so this would be it. I'm sorry if it was a little fast, or if I rushed through things, but yeah, this would be it, guys. I hope you guys have got something out from this.
All right, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Jason. And like Jason said, guys, he's not. You guys can't use this right now because he's not published this app on the Facebook through the Facebook process. And so once he clears it through the Facebook process, is when you'll be able to look at the actual app. Next, and I know we're running short on time, so we're going to try to keep this really tight. But next, what we're going to do is we're going to build a small fintech app, right? And the idea behind a fintech app is that, for example, let's say you're investing on the stock market, right? And you're investing on the stock market, and you want to find out what companies are doing well, right? You don't want to listen to the hype. You don't want to listen to newspapers. You don't want to kind of get swayed by what other people are saying, but you really want to look at certain metrics of what a company is doing and then decide whether or not to invest in it. So Karthikeya, my colleague, is going to talk about how he thinks of the entire fintech app and how he kind of put it together in his mind, and then how he built that app out. And the app is going to be, again, a very simple app which is going to use actual data of actual companies from the last quarter, and it's going to take that data and it's going to help. It's going to create a small web app, and that web app is going to help people who are looking to invest in the stock market figure out how they're going to what companies they should look at, what companies are doing well and what companies are not doing well, right? So I'm going to hand over to my colleague Karthikeya. He'll be just taking over from me. So just give us a second or two and we'll go live.
Hello guys, I'm Karthik. I work at Hasura. I'll be showing you today how to build a small Node.js app on Hasura. So the idea here is to build an app that's sort of based on a fintech idea. So when we started thinking about apps that we could present that had some basis in fintech, one of us had an idea that went something like this. So you know that okay, can you guys see the screen? Okay, I hope you can see the screen. So yeah, there you go. So companies can be yeah. So companies can be ranked on the basis of something called their economic profit. So the idea was to fetch a bunch of data about companies, financial statistics from pages on the web, and sort them by their economic profit. So we can is the screen not visible? Just a second, we'll be fixing this soon. So I had a nice slideshow going. I hope you guys got to see some of it. Is that fine? Okay, so let's go on. So this was the idea. In case you guys missed it, we'll be showing graphs of company performance based on economic profit calculations. We will be getting all the data for this from a random statistics website. So what does this actually involve? So as some of you guys might have realized, we need to run a web scraper to get data from a normal statistics site. We need to store all this data in a database, and we need to have a front end that pulls all this data from the database to display it as a chart. So this is sort of doable in any framework, if from what you guys may know. But let's see how we do this on Hasura. So this is sort of what the architecture for the app will look like. We're going to pull the data from the stats site into the database. It's going to stay there until the front end charts query the data to the database, and you return the data, and the charts display the data in a chart form. So let's see how this is different from what we do in a while when we start building it. So the detailed steps for what do we actually do here? Our setup process will be something like this. We'll first create a Hasura account at hasura.io and start a Hasura project. When you start a Hasura project, you get a namespace for this project, a project name, if you mean. Let's say this, we're going to use an example project called callback 66. Let's call that our project name from now on. Then we're going to have to model our database. We're going to create tables and relationships so that we can store our data in a meaningful format and retrieve it very easily. We're going to then scrape all the data that we need from a financial statistics site and insert it into the database. This is probably something we'll do by the means of a Python script. It's very easy to do that in Python. And then we're going to write a small front end in using JavaScript and Node.js. That will be a simple page that will just query data from the Hasura API and show it in a simple chart. So what are we going to do first? Database modeling. Let's think of how we store our data. So what from this for this entire exercise, we sort of need two simple data objects. One of them. So sorry for the disturbance. Yeah. So let's go back here. So what sort of databases are we going to need here? Our data can be thought of in terms of two simple objects. We're going to have a stocks object and a stock financial data object. What are these? So the stock object is going to represent a company for us. It is going to represent a company with its stock name and its sector. And the stock financial data is going to represent the financial data of a company for a particular year. So we can usually find data for these companies going back a few years. Let's see. Yeah, these Macs, they've got command T. Okay, let's see what sort of data we can get. So this is sort of this is a sort of website you can expect to find and get data from. So we're going to go to a website like this. We're going to look at some of the companies that we find, and we're going to scrape data. So yeah, so now once we have the company data, each company is going to consist of basically just a stock name and a sector name. Once we have company data, we're going to actually go in and find the actual financial data for that company. This is going to consist of a bunch of variables that we are going to define later. It's not super important in the technical sense, but it's just a bunch of calculations that we need to do to find out economic profit. So we will define these variables. We will scrape them from the financial data pages for each of these companies, and we're going to store them in a stock financial data object, each of which is going to represent 1 year of financial data for one company. So what can we sort of understand from the objects that we've created? We need to think in terms of the relationships that we can make between these objects. So what we're using here is Postgres, right? And that's a relational database, which basically means that there is more power in what you do when you build relationships between the objects that you make. So what sort of relationships do the stocks and stock financial data objects have? One thing is very clear, that each stock financial data object has to be linked to one particular stock. Each stock financial data object belongs to a company, to a stock. So you can set that up by having a foreign key in a stock financial data object that links to a stock. The same way, a single stock can have many stock financial data objects. It can have financial data for many years. So this is a one-to-many relationship. So this is something we call an array relationship. So let's get started on this. Yeah, let's get started on this. Let's go to the console for our new project. Which was callback 66. If you remember, you'll be able to log into this console from the username and password that you get on your email. which you will receive once. Oh, just give us a second. We'll find the username and password. So this is something you'll receive as soon as you sign up on the Hasura website. I'm going to sort of show you the password in plain text right now, but yeah, just so the username is going to be admin. And actually, wait, let's be safe here. So this is going to be a pretty long password, but it's pretty safe. So yeah, this is your Hasura dashboard. And once you're here, you can do a bunch of simple things. You can see that what we have are data services, auth services. Okay. So you might have seen, Jason just wants me to remind you guys of something here. You might have seen a different console version when Jason was presenting. That was a much older console version. This is one of the newer console versions, so it might look very different. So yeah, let's move on. So you can see a bunch of microservices here. Let's go on to the data service. You can see that we have a bunch of schema settings and all. So I've already created a couple of tables earlier, which already have data. We'll use them later, but for now, let's see how we can create these tables. So I'm going to create a stock table. This is going to have an ID, which is it needs a primary key, right? So I'm going to have an auto incrementing integer as the primary key. Stock needs a name, so let's have a stock name object. Let's make this text, and each stock belongs to a sector, so let's set the sector to. So this is pretty much all it needs. We're going to set ID as our primary key, and yes, now we have our table. So you can see there's nothing in the table. You can see there are a bunch of other options here which we'll come to later. So let's go on and create our financial data table. So this is going to be our financial data table. This needs a primary key too, so let's go ahead and make that an auto incrementing integer. So each financial data is for a particular year, right? So let's have a year column that's an integer. Now again, each financial data belongs to a certain company, so we need a foreign key to stocks. So let's have a stocks underscore ID. That's an integer. That's a foreign key to our stock table. Okay, so what else do we need? We need a bunch of a bunch of parameters, which I'm going to get from what I've written already. Give me a second. Yeah, we can do it here. So this is basically the schema that I've written up earlier. Let's just see what we've got to create. Yeah. So we need total revenue. Which is going to be a numeric type, which is our equivalent of float and everything else. So we need total tax, which is another numeric type. I seem to have added an extra backquote here. Okay. We need net block, which is just a fancy word for the total any other assets other than net current assets, which is our next variable. So don't worry about what these things mean. These are just things that I need to do my economic profit calculation, which is it's not very important how I calculate my economic profit, because that's not the point of this demo. The point of this demo is to just show off the technical side of this entire thing. So let's just think of these things as background variables, which I'm going to need. And yeah, this should be it. Let's also have a ratio, and yeah, that might be it. Oh, I need profit before tax. I missed that one. Okay, so that is it. So let's go ahead and set ID as our primary key. So okay, so you can see that this table is created. So this is basically what our tables look like. But what else can we do? We need to have foreign keys set up, right? And fortunately, we have something right here that will help us set that up very easily. So what does this mean? So what are the foreign keys here? The stocks underscore ID is a foreign key to the stock table, which we just gave, and it's a foreign key to the ID column of the stock table. So yeah, that's it. We've added a foreign key. So is that enough? So what a foreign key signifies is a one way. It's a one to many relationship between basically all a foreign key means is that whenever you create an object in this s underscore financial underscore data table, it needs to be connected to a stocks underscore ID that actually exists in the stock table. But that's pretty simple, right? Like, is that it? Can't we do further? Can't we go further? Can we define more complex relationships? Not in Postgres, but on Hasura you can. So this is something that is very easy to do. Uh, let's call this stocks. Each financial data object has one stock, so let's just call it stock. And so this has an object. Each financial data object now has a stock relationship. Let's look at what we can do the other way around. Each stock also now needs to have a link to multiple financial data objects, right? So this should be something called an array relationship. So, and helpfully enough, it's right here. Let's call this financials and go ahead. So now we've got our um, table set up. This is our schema. We've got our relationship set up. So uh, to skip, okay, let me actually just go on and show you guys what we need to do next. So what we'll be doing next is we'll be scraping data to fill up our database. So our tables are empty right now, but we're going to need this data from somewhere, right? So what we would do is we would write a small Python script that would get data from money control, this helpful URL, and we would insert it in our database. Okay, let's skip this too. Copying on a Mac seems to be harder than I think. Okay, so let's go ahead. So this is the URL that we're going to get our data from, and we're going to just scrape it with a simple beautiful soup script. This is going to extract all our data and put it in our project. So I'm going to sort of skip through this entire explanation. There'll be a more detailed explanation for this and how this does the inserts, how this does the insert API calls later. We'll be releasing a bunch of videos. Yeah, okay. So, okay, let me just describe this in some detail. So basically what we're doing here is as soon as the script starts, I call a delete all, which deletes my previous set of tables, which I'm going to comment out just so that I don't delete my previous tables right now. And I call a fetch URLs function, which is this function. What this function does is it goes to this URL and it goes to this URL and fetches it fetches the HTML text in the page, finds the variables that we need. Um, calls a bunch of other functions which do all the job, which find the exact numbers that we need, insert them, and it puts all of these variables in a couple of global objects that I've initialized outside here. So once we have all the numbers, we need to put it in the database, right? So how do we do that? So Hasura exposes your database to external API calls in a couple of ways. If you're calling from outside the Hasura system, you can call this URL data.callback66.hasura.app.io, which exposes your app, the data API of Hasura to an external endpoint. And you can notice this is a HTTPS endpoint, so it's reasonably safe. If this was an internal call, if this project was running internally in my Hasura server, I could just do data.hasura, which is what I did earlier, but you guys might want to do something like this. So this is the API URL that we'll be calling. The API, the Hasura API is a reasonably fully fledged API. You can sort of check out the documentation to get a better idea of what I mean. So the documentation sort of explains what the API is, how the API works, but let me just give you an idea of how you use it. So what we do here when we want to insert our data is we use all the data that we have to calculate economic profit. This is our reasonably simple calculation. We end up with a couple of things: an economic profit and an economic profit ratio, which is what we'll be using to rank companies. Then we're going to go on and insert this into the database. This is what you guys need to pay attention to. So we're going to write a JSON query. This is a JSON API. So I think Jason might have explained some of this to you. This is a JSON API, which basically means you write a JSON object and you send it as a post query to this URL up here, the project URL plus v1/query, and it does things. So what exactly, this is how we're going to create our query. It's an insert query to the stocks table, and these are the objects that it's going to insert, the stock data object that we populated earlier in the script, and it's going to return the ID of the auto incremented ID that it inserted stock data with. So this is pretty helpful because now we need to use this auto incremented ID to link every financial data object that we insert to the stock. So we're going to use that and create another query to insert financial data. So here we create the query, and here we use request to send it to the URL. So URL headers, these are the helpful headers that we have. It's just a content type, and this is something that you will find in the documentation. This is how Hasura handles authentication. There is a slightly more complicated authentication token system too that you can also try. So what this query does when you make this request, when you make a post request with to the URL with these headers and that query as your data, you will get a response that tells you if it you will get a response that tells you if it's successful and returns whatever it is that you asked for, like the ID that I asked for here. So I'm going to use this ID and create my financial data query, which is going to insert financial data, one for each year. So I'm going to make a bunch of queries in a for loop. I'm going to get a response for each one of these. Whenever any one of these response fails, I'm going to throw an error, which I will notice and take precautions for, which I'm not really doing right now, as you can see, but you can. So yeah, so here is where we are inserting the data, and once we do that, we're going to end up with a database that looks something like this. Yeah, so here is a table where I've already inserted data using the script, and you can see that I have several stock names, several companies with their sectors, and this link, this financial column that I have seems to link each. What it does is this is a benefit of the object relationship that we declared earlier. This links each one of the stocks objects with the several financials that it can have. Like Reliance is linked to the financial data for each one of the years that I've scraped the website for. So you can see that all this data is populated, and I've calculated economic profit, which is overwhelmingly negative. This is something you'll see for quite a few companies. Um, there are very few companies where it will be positive, and those guys are the real winners. They're actually gaining over the market. They're making more profit than you would if you had just invested the money in infrastructure. So yeah, that's not super important because the economic aspects here are not the important part. And each financial object is again linked back to the stock, to its stock, so you can just keep going back in an endless loop here. So okay, let's go back and see what we can do further. So now that we have our data, we're going to start uh, using it, and we're going to try to set up our front end. So how do we do this? Uh, we do this by using some very helpful quick start templates that we have set up uh, on one of our repositories. But you don't need to do, you can just copy over one of these folders and get started. But it's we made it even simpler. So once you download Hasura CTL, and once you've authenticated, all you need to do once you authenticated with Hasura CTL login, all you need to do is just Hasura CTL set context to the project that you've decided to use. So let's do that. So we've set our context to callback 66. What this does, for those of you curious enough, is this sets the Kubernetes context so that that makes Kubernetes commands easier to run, and it tells us where to reach for our servers. Once you've set context, you can check out the list of quick start projects available with Hasura CTL quick start list. So this will give you a list of projects that we've already prepared that will directly work with Hasura on any one of these frameworks. So let's go ahead and start off with a node folder. That's node.js express. Let's call this economic or profit. Now what this does is this command sets up a service deployment and sets up something we call a git push project. Uh, the positive upshot of all this is that once you run this command and once this sets up the folder for you, all you need to do is just cd into that folder that it's created. Just a second. Yeah, all you need to do is cd into the folder that it's created, and okay, looks like we got disconnected. Just give me a second. Okay, the internet seems to be slightly shaky here. Let's go ahead and do this again, but change the name so that we don't conflict. Okay, so let's hope the internet holds up this time. Yeah, so what this does is this downloads our quick start repository, copies it in. Now now what you have here is, when you do an ls, what you can notice is that there's a profit directory created, and when you go into that directory, you can see that you have a simple node um, service setup. You can check the Docker file to see what actually happens when you try to deploy it. This is something that you might want to like read up on Docker files and understand. But yeah, let's go into the meat of the thing. This is our simple node file. Okay, now let's deploy this. I mean, we did get some friendly advice from Hasura CTL. It told us to do a git git commit -am. Let's do an initial commit, and let's do a push to git push to the master Hasura. So yeah, so what this does is this is going to push your project to the Hasura service that on the Hasura project end, and this is going to build your project as a Docker image based on the Docker file and deploy it. What this actually means is you're going to end up having a profit.callbacks 66.hasura app.io URL, which just works. So what did this actually do? Let's check out our Node.js server.js folder, and this is where you see it. This works. So let's go ahead and see what we can do from this. So now that we have a simple Node.js folder setup, let's go back to our slides here. So we've done this, right? We've finished database modeling. We have our database, and yeah. So now that we finished our database modeling, we've done our scraping, we need to just create our front end. So we're going to use chart.js, which is a pretty simple and default chart uh, system. We're going to use that to make a page that is going to make a bunch of JSON requests to the Hasura data API to fetch data, and is going to show a list of sectors. It's going to show all the companies sector by sector for user to select data from, and is going to show a comparison of all these companies using our economic profit numbers. So let's see what we have here. So the Hasura data API is something that you can sort of see um, so it's something that helps you handle requests to all this without directly going into SQL. There are a lot of advantages for not having to do SQL. One, not the least of which, is that the Hasura API sort of gives you a graph-like interface for your queries. You can sort of you can just basically query, like you can query a stock and all the financial data objects connected to it in one single query. For those of you familiar with SQL, this might seem like something you can already do in Django or Rails. But what Django or Rails do is they split up this query into multiple small queries, and they make them one at a time, which just adds to the overhead on your database. So getting them all in one query is actually pretty useful. So let's go ahead and set that up. So this is our webinar folder, and what we're going to do is we're going to get this app.this folder to instead render something else. So before we do that, let's just set up some local development so that it's easy for us to test things out. Let's do an npm install, which is going to install all the packages that we need. So so yeah, now that we have our packages set up, just give me a second. Yeah. Okay, so let's just go ahead. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to need a page that has a chart system setup. So for this, let's start rendering. Let's, instead of res.send, let's do what is this? This color scheme is really bad, so let's change the color scheme. This is better. Yeah. Whoa, this makes everything else worse. Okay, let's just do this. So let's render an index file, and let's add Are we doing the pug thing? Okay, let's add a view engine so that it's easier for us. Yeah, let's do this to install pug. Okay, so what we're basically going to do is set up a simple template engine and build a single page that is going to handle showing a chart and also querying data from our data APIs. So let's make a views folder and an index.pug folder. And again, we will change the color scheme. This is better. No, this is horrible. Let's go back to this. Okay, so yeah, now we have this. Let's have a title and yeah. So this is a simple page. Let's see if this works out. So just to show you guys that this is easy, I'm going to just deploy this quickly. I'm going to just deploy this quickly. I did a git add, I did a git commit, and I'm going to do a git push. And again, you're going to see the same thing happening that happened the first time. It's going to push to the remote. It's going to build the Docker image, and in the end, restart the server. So we have where we had this. It is going to end up. Once it restarts, it's going to load. Yeah, you can see that it's terminating our previous pod and starting a new one. So once that's over, it's going to start a new one. So yeah, let's get started. In the meantime, we're going to go into app source and do some local development. I can just do an npm start, and that's going to start. Oh, looks like there's already a local server. I'm going to kill my local server. Give me a second. Okay, so we're going to do an npm start, and yes, okay, so let's do something easier for that. Okay, so now that we have a tmux instance, let's do an npm start in this, and let's keep that running. So what that does is it sets up. Oh yeah, there looks like there's a gateway timeout here. We made some mistake in our thing. Let's check that here. Let's go to local host 8080. Okay. Oh yeah. Okay. So our setup is sort of weird here. I'm SSH'd into my comp from here, so this is actually not going to work. Let's continue deploying on this then. Okay, I'm going to reload this. Yeah, it's going to take a while. Okay, so I'm not going to be able to show you guys the local development part because I'm SSH'd into somebody else's computer because the webinar software does not seem to work on Linux. So okay, just give me a second here. Yeah, looks like this pod hasn't started up yet. which is why we are seeing this. This is probably because there are way too many pods, so I'm going to kill a bunch. Mm. Yeah, so I'm just going to set this up. This is my test project, which I've been fiddling with for a while, so this might be a little bit slower than usual. So okay, so yeah, let me just okay. This looks like this is taking a lot of time, so let me just stop with this and show you an app that I've already set up to give you guys an idea of what it's going to look like at the end. So this is the same. This is a folder that started off from the same humble roots as the quick start repo, and I've just modified this to have. If you look at the server.js, it's basically the same thing that we just wrote. We have a res.render that is rendering our index file, and if you check our index file, this is basically a more complicated version of what we had. We are loading a bunch of scripts, which are going to have all our charts and whatnot. So we have a bunch of scripts. We are loading Bootstrap, we're loading jQuery, and we're loading the Hasura JS SDK, which is basically a simple SDK that makes it far easier to query Hasura APIs on JS using JavaScript. Let me show you. Let me give you an idea of what that looks like. The actual page itself is pretty simple. It sort of just says charts here and has a drop down to select things, and then has a canvas. What we do is once the document is ready, I set my Hasura context again here too. I set the callback 66 as my Hasura context, and I query the Hasura API. I make a select query. I select all the stocks, all the columns in the stocks, and that's it. This small query is going to instantly give me all the columns in the stocks. This is making a direct query to our to the Hasura data API. Notice that you guys did not have to write any code to do this. This is there is no boilerplate involved here, as like there would be in Ruby or Django. You can basically just directly query the database, and this is secure. This is authenticated. This is secure. So what I've done right now is I've basically let anonymous users have access to my test table, so that I can just do this without authenticating myself here, because authentication is slightly, it's out of the scope of this particular demo. So I have this query, which when when it returns, it goes to this make drop down. Let's do the color scheme thing again. So yeah, it returns to make drop down, which is here. Does this seem too weird for you guys? Is the color scheme too bad? Yeah, this is the same old one. Okay, let's just stick with this. So let's just stick with this. So yeah, so what happens now in make drop down is that it selects the drop down that we have. Um, Let me just start deploying this so that you guys can see what I mean. So yeah, this git push is again the same way, the same as we did before. This git push is again going to deploy our system into Hasura master, and we are going to see this deploys to URL. This is deploying to an app called stocks. So which is here. So as it loads, let's just see what it's actually doing. So you can see that we have a console here that was not able to load chart.js because it's a HTTP page, which cannot be served over HTTPS. So let's fix that. I think I just fixed that, and that was the commit. Yeah, I've just fixed that. So that should happen now. So I'm going to close this. I'm on the wrong branch, so I'm going to check out master. And now I'm going to edit the file here. This is HTTP. I'm going to change this to HTTPS. Let's see if that works. I can't seem to copy this on a Mac, so let me just type this in. Okay, so looks like Chart.js does not have a HTTPS part here, so I'm going to skip this. I'm going to reset to my older commit, which is this. Okay, let's go ahead and finish this as we figure this out. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, what this script does is it first gets, yeah, one sec, I need to copy this. I need to reset to that commit. So I need to copy the commit ID. How do I copy on a Mac? Yeah, sorry guys, we're having slight operating system troubles. Yeah, okay. Okay, yeah, I looks like I've done this before. Huh. Okay. So yeah, now that we're here, let's push that. Oh yeah, I know what's happening here. Okay, so this is going to be harder to fix than I thought. So let's actually go ahead and try this out. I'll explain this to you while we fix that. So what's happening here is, oh, this is our older version. Let's go back to our test branch where we can check out the newer version of the code. So yeah, let's look at this. What we have here is at the beginning of the page, where as soon as the document is loaded, we have a data query that we make that gets a list of all the stocks, and we use this to populate a dropdown that we have. This dropdown populates the entire system with a set of with sectors, and once somebody selects these sectors, the sector on change function is triggered, which goes ahead and just give me a second, guys. Give me a second, and I'll just be back in a second. Okay, so we've fixed. Yeah, so we pushed this. Okay, so we've managed to set this up here in the meantime, since we're having some issues uh, deploying this right now. So let's go ahead and work on this now. Um, let's close this. Go up here. Mm. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're just going to show this on. We're going to do an npm start here, and this is basically what we have. So this is what I've prepared already. So what you can see happens here Okay, let's look at the console. Okay, so let's actually go ahead and look at what the file does. Looks like we're having some issues here, guys. This is a complicated problem with trying to deploy on a Mac SSH into a Linux system from this Mac and then try to do a local setup. We're is running on this. So this is my local app, right? Yeah, that's what I'm doing. Why is he telling me console is on? Okay. Okay. Yeah. So guys, sorry for the issues we're having right now. We seem to be having some weird difficulties. So let's go ahead and set this up properly. Yeah. So this is the app that I already prepared. It has the index page. Let me change the colors so that I can go right back. I'm going to remove the utils.js. I'm going to make this HTTP and try reloading this. This is on. Yeah, I've closed it. I'm going to restart that. Go back here. And there you have it. So, okay, so I'm still having some connection issue. Sorry. Okay. So we're fixing the issues with the remote server. In the meantime, I'm going to actually set this up. I'm going to do something here. Okay, so we're rebooting the system here. So the data queries aren't going through. So let's look through the code in the meantime as these guys reboot the system and set it up. Once we have the system set up, we're going to be able to make the data queries. Let's just look through the code. So we have the Hasura query that we populate the dropdown with, and then we go in to the whenever the dropdown changes, we go into this function that makes another query. This query fetches from the table stocks. It fetches all the columns and also goes further in. This is actually something that is fairly difficult to do on a normal SQL query, but this is something that you can sort of do with the Hasura API. You can fetch objects that are linked by a relationship to your primary query by just specifying them as an extension of the primary query. This will all happen in one single SQL request. So what you're going to get here is all the stocks, all the columns in the stocks, and all the objects that are linked to this through the financial relationship, which, if you guys remember, is something we set up in our relationships table. So each stock object has a financial relationship which links it to several stock financial data objects. So this way we can in one SQL request retrieve all the financial objects that are linked to the stock. So we're going to get the EP underscore ratio and the year columns, and we're going to order it by year. Once we have that, we're going to create our table, which is going to look something like this. The table initialization is pretty simple. Just can you guys test it once? Yeah. So once we do that, the table initialization is pretty simple. We're going to have uh, so yeah, this is our uh, empty data set that we're going to insert data in. We're going to have labels for each of the years that we have data for. So what we do is we get the data from the sector. We get the data from the sector, the sector name that is currently selected in the dropdown. Uh, we're going to use that to filter all the 100 companies that we have, that we fetched here, all the stocks that we have, we're going to filter all those and get only the ones that have sector as the sector in the drop down. Now for each of these, look at this line here. For each of these sectors, we're going to insert into the data set the data for this particular column. So the file that we weren't actually receiving had these colors in that, so that it would look kind of neat. But yeah, let's skip over that and set it up. Okay, is the 192 that's up? Okay, so yeah, so now that we have this, we might as well just go ahead and try this. So it looks like this is up. Let's reload this. So yeah, so what you would expect this to do is you would expect this to show you a drop down, and once you select a category on that drop down, you would expect it to show you a chart, a line chart. So yeah, what we have here is a drop down, and when you select something on the drop down, you get a chart. So this is the data that we've scraped earlier, and okay, yeah, so this is whatever beautiful endpoint that you guys had imagined, but it's not as beautiful. But yeah, thank you for bearing with us through all these difficulties. Okay, so yeah, so now that we have this, what you can see is that this shows you the economic profit ratios that were calculated. The economic profit ratio is nothing but the economic profit divided by the total revenue of the company, so that you can actually compare companies that are of different sizes. So when you compare all these companies, you can sort of see that some of these companies had uh, a much better performance than. So basically, zero is where is default performance. What zero is is market performance. What is the average among all the companies, and all companies, not just of this sector, of every sector. So if a company performs better than zero, that means it's doing wildly better than average. And if a company is doing worse than zero, that means it's having a bad time. So you can sort of see this in other sectors where you can see some things going like below zero. So you can see that Oracle seems to have performed much worse over 2014, but seems to have picked up recently. So this is basically the sort of thing that this is a sort of endpoint that we can get to. This is all done in this one file here. Okay, so let me just give you a small explanation of what this thing looks like. Okay, so let's reload this page. Okay, so I'll explain what's happening here. So what you have here is a single drop down, and that's this drop down here, and when you select this drop down is initially populated by a query that we make to our database. We make a query here, we make a select query, we get all the stocks, every single column in the stock, and we use that to populate our drop down here. And once the drop down is populated, this is what you're going to see. You can also see that when you reload the page for a while, the dropdown appears to be empty. That's because the AJAX request is happening in the background and it's not populated yet. Yeah, there you go. So now that it's populated, you can select something. You can select a particular category. And what happens then, as soon as you select it, is whenever the dropdown changes, this on change event gets triggered, and it calls, and we make another query here. So what we're making here is another select query. We select all the stocks, and we select all the financial objects that are related to each one of these stocks. We select the economic profit ratio for each one of these financials and the year in which this happened, and we order it by year. So once we have this data, we need to sort this by sector name. So where can we get the sector name from? So this sector name is available in the drop down value, right? So we can just directly get the drop down select ID, which is this element, uh, which is this element. And let's go ahead and look at this here. So yeah, so this is the drop down select element. We're going to select the value of that element, which is going to give us the sector that we need to choose. And once we have that sector, we're going to do a filter. We're going to filter all the entire data set that we have, filter it, and check for those elements which have sector name as sector. So once we get that, we are going to draw our chart, insert data sets of a specific color. This is the color, and with data for those specific labels. So this is for the first year. This is for 2013. This is for 2014. Remember, it's ordered by year. So we take that and we create a new chart, and that chart is what shows up here. So what's happening here is that initially you see Mahindra and Mahindra that has um, this is all negative. If you guys are actually able to see, this is all below zero. So both of these are performing badly. So Mahindra and Mahindra that has a minus 0.008 economic profit quotient ratio, and it seems to actually perform worse as time goes on, and eventually picks up around 2017. And then you see Maruti Suzuki, which is performing worse here, and then again picks up heavily recently. So this is basically what we've done here is we've started off with this idea, and we've built this architecture. We've actually gone through this part. We've taken data from the statistics site, we put it in our database using the scraper, and then we've built a front end page that just queries the Hasura platform for data, gets the data, and then shows it in a way that you want it to show. So this is something that I was actually going to demonstrate building this entire thing to you, but due to a small issue with how we did that, we couldn't actually go through this in full. But let's actually deploy this so that you guys can actually see. I've been doing this on my local host so far, but I'm going to change this URL. There's a better URL. I'm going to change this. Okay. Okay. So yeah, so this is basically the only change. So I'm going to end this here, and I'm going to leave it to Tanmai to summarize.
All right, guys. So that was Karthik here, and I hope you got a little bit of an understanding of how to think about building a fintech kind of application, how to think about building a fintech kind of an application, right? And the key thing that he did here was that he did not have to worry about the database portions. So he just modeled his database, and then he got a bunch of data APIs. And as soon as he got a bunch of data APIs ready, he just started using those data APIs. So his first idea of using the data API was to take data, scrape it from money control, scrape that data, and insert that into his database, right? Do the calculations and insert it into his database. The second part was that he built the UI, and the UI was just a simple chart.js UI, which was just using charts. And then what it was doing was it was fetching the data from these data APIs and displaying that, right? So he used the data APIs to insert the data, and then he used the data APIs to kind of fetch the data. But as you can see, the bulk of the work was in figuring out, how this, how this app would work, how you do the scraping. We used a website like moneycontrol.com. You guys can use whatever website you want, and then how you basically think about building out the app that you need for, say, for example, a hackathon. The hackathon that's coming up, or for whatever app that you're building, and how you use data APIs on the back to kind of get the job done, right? So you don't have to worry about how the data is stored. You're more worried about your application. You're more worried about what is the data that you're getting. You're more worried about building the application and visualizing the application, right? So what I'll do next is I'll take a bunch of quick questions, whatever you guys have, and then we'll kind of wrap up the session. So I think some of the last questions that you guys have is, somebody said what hackathon is coming up. So this webinar is a webinar that we're doing along with HackerEarth, and they have a hackathon in Pune this weekend, and we're also helping out the students helping out people at the hackathon. So some of the people who are attending this webinar are from that hackathon. That's why the hackathon is coming up, Hemant. But if it's not relevant to you, it's not relevant to you. We'll also be attaching the recording of this tutorial, and we'll be adding some more information that we were not able to cover in the webinar, and we'll be sending out those video links to all of you guys, right? and I think a few questions around what console we're using. So the version of Hasura, the console that they were using, was different for JSON and was different for Kartikeya, which is why you'd see a difference in the UI, but the core features have kind of stayed the same. I think that kind of takes in all the questions. Do you guys have any other quick questions? And then we can kind of take that. Anirudh has a suggestion that we should take this as advanced part of advanced IMAD. Yes, I think what we basically want to do is create as many of these small micro courses, part 1, part 2, part 6 kind of tutorials on making a chatbot, making a fintech app, and putting all of those out as mini courses that would be useful to guys who are just getting started building these apps. So what we are looking for from you guys is to get back to us. Just go to our Twitter handle, go to Hasura HQ. And we'll also send you those links in an email later. But go to Hasura HQ and tell us what kind of webinars you guys would want to see next, what kind of tutorials you guys want to see next, and what will be helpful for you when you're building out the application, right? Especially for those people who are going to be in the hackathon, right? Please get in touch with us, and especially if this is your first few times that you're building an application, you might not be able to build everything in 20 hours, right? So use our help, because our job is to help you get a good application built, right? However you're building it, we don't care. So get in touch with us, tell us what kind of tutorials you want to see, tell us what kind of demos you want to see, and we'll try to set those up for you. We'll try to send you links to videos or tutorials so that you guys can get started before so that you can make sure that you use those 20 hours to actually get your application out. So are there any other questions? I think Hemant has a question. Can you use something like Amazon Lex or IBM Watson? Yes, you can. You can use the Hasura APIs for doing that. And we'll do a tutorial around Amazon Lex or around Watson. So we'll do a link for you, Hemant, and we'll send that to you. Give us a day or two. Any other questions, guys? No, Anirudh, the hackathon is unfortunately not online, right? This is an offline hackathon, but we will be doing an online hackathon soon. We'll send you a link so that you can subscribe to our hackathon newsletter or something like that. And we'll get the HackerEarth guys to also send you some links on when the online hackathon is going to be. So don't worry about that. George, we'll share the link of the Profit app with you so that you guys can go over the code, right? If there are no more questions, okay, wait, there are some other questions around machine learning and deep learning. So Nitish, basically the idea behind using Hasura is to give you a data API, to give you the auth API, and to help you deploy your code on a domain and on an HTTPS protected domain, right? So you can kind of build these models, but because training these models is different from using these models, right? So when you're training your deep learning model, when you're training your deep learning models, then you need like more compute, right? So you need to have you need to kind of you need large number of cores or large memory, and then you kind of train your model there. Say you use something like TensorFlow, you train it there, and then when you use it, you can just kind of use that library inside your web app, right? So you can use Hasura for the deployment and the hosting portion of your web app, but the training portion is kind of, I mean, TensorFlow runs anywhere, right? TensorFlow will run on a Hasura project, it'll run on your machine, it'll run on some random VM also. So that is the hard part, right, with deep learning. But Hasura kind of does not help / does help with building deep learning, right? Deep learning is more a different problem that you need to solve yourself, and then once you've solved that problem, you can then deploy your app. George, for the online hackathon, we'll send you details separately. You guys can have teams from 1 to 3, but we'll send you details for that separately, right? That's kind of not a part of this thing. All right, guys. So thank you, and I'm sorry that we had a few issues. We were trying to do this webinar from a Linux machine. So Karthikeya actually had the entire thing prepared on his Linux machine, but we couldn't get GoToWebinar to the webinar software to work on Linux, and so we had to use Mac, and we SSH'd from a Mac machine into the Linux machine to do the second part, which is why sometimes it got a little complicated. But I hope this was useful to you guys, and I think if you guys head to stocks.callback66.hasura.io. So if you guys can see my screen, stocks.callback66.hasura.io, you guys can also see this app. The app is live, right? So this is the economic profit app. So right, so I guess there should be data for personal care. So this app is also live. You guys can check it out, right? And you guys can start investing in the stock market. Don't invest in what company is this? Colgate. Don't invest in Colgate. No, guys, I did not say that. I did not say that on record. I'm just joking, right? But so check this app out, and we'll be sending you links, right? Soon. And I need to connect my charger. Thank you, Nitish. See you guys. Bye. Get in touch with you guys, and see you guys. Those of you who are coming to the hackathon, see you guys there. And otherwise, let's keep in touch online. Bye, guys. Thank you for hanging around.